Hey, read the disclaimer. Hey fellas. Welcome back to the Brickbuilt Archive, a YouTube series where we mix history with plastic construction toys to feel superior to the average plastic toy enjoyer. I'd like to start this video a little bit different than usual. I want to tell you a story. The year was 1415 AD in Constance, modern-day Germany. A man stands tied at the stake with a grim expression, knowing that in a matter of minutes he would not be long for this world. This man's name was Jan Hus, a known preacher who protested about the state of the church and those who run it. And unbeknownst to him, his death at the stake by the hands of the Catholic Church and the German authorities would set off one of the conflicts that, in my humble opinion, would be the most incredible underdog war story of medieval history. See, Jan Hus had moved a lot of people with his speeches, and had amassed a quite large fan base, especially among the lower ranks of medieval society. These people didn't take his death lightly. Fast forward 4 years, in 1419, where the ripples of Hus's execution brewed a war that little did the Bohemian authorities and the surrounding nobles of their time know, would almost put their professional armies to shame. The Hussite Wars were a period of Bohemian history where a bunch of religious fanatics and peasants, led by the now mythical figure of Jan Žižka, managed to actually trample armies of professional soldiers and take them for a run for their money, and only really got stopped after their own allies started turning against them. Žižka knew that his forces were basically outclassed by the professional armies that the Bohemians, Crusaders and Holy Roman Empire had, so he had to get creative. He did so firstly by letting his men utilize weapons they were already familiar with, rather than training them in more effective combat weapons. We're talking about farming flails, reforged scythes, axes, and for the folks that came from the city, crossbows and even firearms. It was this move, the usage of gunpowder, coupled with his tactical genius and the usage of war carts, which allowed him to turn any sort of open field battle into essentially a defend a fort situation, what ultimately helped Žižka run the Catholic Church and whoever they sent around like Team USA has been running around the poor teams in the Overwatch World Cup, and I dare say with a similar degree of disrespect. I find this piece of history absolutely ridiculous and almost out of a fantasy book. I mean, imagine sending an army of well-trained knights, human mercenaries, known for being ruthless and incredibly good at what they do even if they were heathens and barbarians for the average Polish lord, and similar, to squash some peasants that have been squabbling and rioting over you burning a heretic at the stake, only to get absolutely curb-stomped by said peasants riding carts and wielding homemade guns. So much for the US having done it first, huh? This conflict is, in my opinion, one of the greatest examples of how peasant militias, levies, and otherwise soldiers considered cannon fodder by the average folk could be used to a frighteningly effective degree. I believe a lot of the things that Žižka employed can serve as wonderful ideas for making your own LEGO armies, and I can easily prove it, because this has been a project of mine for months now. Let's talk about what kinds of weapon you can fit your LEGO militias with. I made these farming flails using a reddish-brown staff piece and these bar-to-clip pieces that I got from the online pick-a-brick store at lego.com. Flails were used in the Middle Ages to beat the grain out of wheat, and it developed as a weapon of war due to the peasants being used to wielding this type of equipment. It's overall a simple weapon, but I think it looks good and the LEGO version represents the real deal quite well. Another common weapon for a peasant who didn't have proper edge alignment training, for example, were axes. Hand axes and axes generally were used by a lot of medieval peasants to cut wood, so the majority of them knew how to use one. Using the clip axe piece on a small bar or a lightsaber length bar works quite well, but I would also recommend these small axes, because not only do they look decent, but they are also one of the cheapest weapon utensils LEGO sells. You can find these ones in Bricklinks, sometimes for less than 10 cents. Reforged scythes are a weapon that, while I don't have much historical reference on, appear in one of my favorite games of all time, Kingdom Come Deliverance. And since this game has a whole dedicated team of historians to confirm the historical accuracy of everything within it, I wouldn't be surprised if they existed. In concept, they're just scythes that had their blades straightened to go parallel with the shaft of the weapons, turning it into something akin to a glaive. I made 2 designs to represent them. One I only have in concept since I wasn't really feeling like getting all the pieces for it, and the other one I have over here. I prefer the use of the machete piece since it does give it a quite nice profile. Another interesting type of weapon you could make is a wooden club or a wooden mallet. Mallets were used by English longbowmen to set down stakes, but generally they were a common tool found in most farms to set down fences. I don't have one with me because my wallet is already empty as is, but I made a design that works quite well in Bricklink Studio. Here's a picture of the pieces separated so you can analyze it and build it yourself. For the club, it's just a shaft, a cone piece, a hollow stud and a tile. I think it sells the idea of a small wooden club quite well. Generally speaking, your militias and levies are where you should focus on being creative with the variety of weapons you give them. Not every folk had access to the same weapons or had the training with them, so the best way to sell your army of peasants, rebels or not, is just that, through the variety of weapons that they wield, rather than the more uniform standing army with pikes and fancy weapons. If you want to sell the idea that your soldiers are not that well trained, I'd avoid using swords, bar any sword that is single-edged such as the machete piece. Swords do require a bit of training to get good at, and were more relegated as self-defense weapons rather than weapons of war. Militias and levies, especially the ones like the hussites, had limited resources to work with, and I recommend you to keep this mindset as well. These kinds of armies are the ones where you get to be creative with your pieces and get comfortable with what you have at hand. This is not only for weapons, but this can also be applied to other implements, such as this cart, which I've built inspired by hussite war wagons used in the Hussite Wars. I was surprised to find that there's no such builds anywhere in Brickbuilt, so cue the music. For only €1.50, you too can be the proud owner of the instructions for this marvel of medieval warfare. It comes with everything you need to give your peasants the edge in combat they need. So head on now to Brickbuilt.com, link in the comments, and nab yourself your own copy today. This tiefling's gotta pay for his plastic edition somehow, and this show could use a bit more budget than an old Lego collection and some lucky purchases. As some final notes, the surrounding lore of your militia affects the way they're gonna be organized or the gear that they have available. A levy of steppe dwellers who are used to hunting on horseback would probably look more like a set of horse archers. Meanwhile, a levy from the large cities would probably be more versed in guns and crossbows to defend walls with. Speaking of which, I guess I should talk about guns and gunpowder one of these days, eh? I think with the current length of this video, we could probably make a proper episode dedicated solely to this topic. I have a couple things I want to say about it. And that's all I have for this video, folks. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like the video, and you can check the rest of my channel for more. Without further ado, thanks for watching, this has been Gyojo, and I'll see you next one.